Good people of the world, welcome to FiddleHed Fiddle Lessons. Today we will be learning tunes from sheet music. So I'm going to give you some tips and strategies for learning to read sheet music, figuring out what's going on. So I'm going to dive right into the main points, and then we'll drill down deeper onto that later in the lesson. So the first main point is to learn tunes incrementally. Don't try to read the whole thing in one big bite. Take a little nibble and then really taste that, okay? The second big tip is that when learning to read tunes with lots of embellishments and extra stuff added, to simplify it as much as possible. Finally, this is not exactly a strategy for learning to read music, but for just learning the music itself. You can use sheet music to really help you practice and focus on different parts of a song. I'm going to show you about that. Okay, so let's get started. So the first big tip is just start with a small piece. Just like if I were to teach you a tune, I wouldn't play you a long, complex tune and say, now you do it. As we do in these lessons, if you've taken a few with me already, you know that I'm just going to give you a little piece, give you that, encourage you to stay with that on your own if necessary, and then the next little piece, and then we put them together. It's incremental learning, what I call micro practice, also known as deliberate practice. Okay, very focused learning in which we build on things. So, for the benefit of the widest range of people, we're going to start with a very beginner tune, and then we'll look at a more advanced tune. So one of the most beginner tunes I teach, if we look at the screen video, is Bile Cabbage Down. And so we're just going to start by looking at, if this was a tune you didn't know, I would encourage you to just start with that first bar. See if you can figure it out. And if you have no idea, and what you could do is listen to audio of it and then start there, or look at a legend of, like a note finder is what I call it. So I'm just going to go down to the bottom of the lesson, and you could basically look at a note finder and be like, okay, so that D2 is F sharp and the next note is G, all right? So however you get there, and this lesson is more holistic. I'm not going to dwell too much on that because I teach you how to read on each note in separate lessons. So this is more just a strategy lesson. Always work in increments is the basic idea. So we get that first bar down, whatever it is, and for this tune it's this. And then you look for repetition, and if you scan forward, see if you find it again. The third bar is the same as the first. Cool. So that just makes your job easier. And then we would learn the second bar, maybe put the first two together and then practice reading those, and then get the fourth bar and then practice reading the third and fourth bar and then the whole tune. All right. So that's one just general strategy, the very incremental learning. Another strategy you can use is to play the scale of the tune. If you don't know what it is, usually when I teach, I tell people, like either on the lesson page or an in-person lesson, I just tell them it's in D major, which is this, and just warm up with that scale. Always a good strategy, not just for playing and getting the tune and getting the feel of the tune right in your playing, but also reading. It'll make it a lot easier. And so anyway, for Bile Cabbage Down, we would simply play a D major scale. And then we can start doing the tune. All right. So, and then we would go through what I call the intuitive note reading practice. And you could do that with single bars. So, for instance, the first bar you could play it without reading. Once you figure that out, just sit there and play it for a little while. After you get it, then just really look at it, study it. Okay, what's going on here? D major, 4/4, 4/8 notes, and then 2 quarter notes. Okay, and now try to do both at the same time. Just that bar. That's the process of intuitive note reading. You can start with do it on something little, but eventually on a whole tune. You could play the entire tune, then you could just read the entire tune with or without audio, and then you could do both, play and sing at the play and read at the same time. Now what I want to talk about is, like, let's say you're doing something and you discover a very difficult part for you in that sheet music. And what you could do is take a pencil and look. If we're looking at the screen video, I've done this for a tune, a swallowtail variation tune, and I've bracketed out the end. This one part of the variation because it's hard, and so this is a strategy you could use for anything. And this is why having the tool of sheet music can be helpful in other ways besides just getting the tune and getting the melody in your head. It can help you practice it, because then if you bracket that out, then next day when you go to practice it, you hit up all those bracketed spots first, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I really have trouble with. And then you can just do that a bunch. Hit up all the trouble spots, then you're ready to go and do the whole thing again. So in that way you make your practice time much more efficient than if you just kind of went through the tune every time. It would be less efficient because you don't need to work on a lot of the other parts. You have those really difficult parts that you want to really spend more time with, give more love to. And so again, this is the principle of deliberate practice, to kind of really work at your edge, to keep track of what's hard, and to just slowly get those things better, all right? But it'll be a lot more slow if you don't somehow record this, what's hard, or keep track of what's hard. So another useful thing with sheet music is to, when you're learning a new tune, like I said earlier, you don't want to learn the whole thing right away. Maybe you do, but if it's a very long piece, say if it was a classical tune or just a long fiddle tune, like some of the Irish tunes are like 5 parts, you could use the sheet music to help you keep track of how far you made it. So maybe you only made it like through the A part. You could put brackets and then put a date in pencil by the latest where you made it last, okay? And so that kind of will be good tracking. So the next day when you go to practice it, you'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna make it to that point, and then when you feel ready, you can move on and then date the next part. And in that way, you'll see your progress through the tune, okay? So the next part of the lesson, the next big principle, and the last thing we'll do in this lesson, is to simplify tunes as much as possible. So that is, when you have written sheet music, a lot of times it'll have a lot of embellishments written in. So let's go to an example. So right here, you'll see the tune Swallowtail Jig, and this that I'm pointing at right now is a variation version. It's a little bit more challenging. It's not really the essence of the melody. So my big suggestion is, if possible, find a simpler version, all right? And so here I also have a simple version of the tune that I teach. I actually have 2 separate lessons for this. And so I would say, even if you're advanced, learn the basic version first, and then go, and maybe that'll just take you a few minutes if you're really an advanced player, but then go back and then learn the variations. So there's a couple reasons why this is a good idea. The first is, it'll just be easier to learn the tune, simply put, if you don't have all the embellishments. And I'm going to go into what exactly can be taken out in a minute. But so if you don't have all that stuff cluttering the tune, then you can really get to the pure melody that's there. And it'll be easier for you to learn, but also it'll make you more creative, because you'll see, well, this is the basic tune, And this is how we got to the variation, but I can do it in different ways. If you just get locked into doing a certain version on the page, you might just soon become tethered to sheet music. Now, most of you are fiddlers, I assume, and so, but some of you used to play classical and are now doing fiddle. So a real pitfall for classical musicians is that they sometimes are very tethered to the music. They can't do anything different. And so what I want you to be able to do is be able to look at a piece of music, written music that is, and see the different possibilities. All right. So if it's simple, you can be like, well, I can add this, and I can add slurs, and I can add 16th note duplets, whatever. I can add a turn. All right. And then vice versa. You can look at very complicated music and be like, well, I see what's going on, but I can simplify it, get the melody, memorize it, and then go back and add stuff. Plus, you can add what you really feels right to you. Maybe you don't like all the particular variations that are added. Maybe you want to do something, you want to add different variations, or you just want to play it more simply. So this is the skill that you will be fostered if you learn how to simplify sheet music. Okay, so that's a big kind of general talk. Now I'm going to talk about how specifically I did this, okay? So we're going to go further down the page in the screen video. And notice I just took a pen and kind of marked this up. Now, I used a pen because it'll be easier to read on the computer, and scanning the image, it was easier, but you really should use a pencil. You should have, if you're reading sheet music, have a pencil and an eraser nearby. Okay, and because you're gonna want, once you mark it up, you've learned it, then you may want to erase it. And unless you're just doing a printout or something, you can print it again without your markings. But if it's like a book, say, definitely use the pencil. You don't want to ruin the music with a pen and then not be able to correct it. So I'm just gonna talk through the steps I did. Here's the variation. I remove, instead of playing these 16th note duplets, let me just play this bar for you. So this is a harder thing to simplify, but it will make sense. When you see like two notes written this way, it probably sounds really cool to do it, but when you're learning it, you can simplify it. You can fuse these two 16th notes together into an 8th note, and that's what I marked here. So I just crossed one of them out. I crossed out the 16th note, so it just looks like 3 8th notes. So now that first bar just sounds like very simple, okay? So, and note, that's exactly what my basic version is now. So then those 16th note duplets happen a few times in this version, in the second bar, in the third bar, and I just did the same trick every time, okay? And a few other spots, here and here. Okay, so that's the first thing. But what I should have started with is slurs. So what I think that's a more easy thing to take away. Just take away the slurs. Again, you eventually want to add them back and try whatever those slur markings are, because they're probably a good idea to at least try. But while learning it, focus on getting the melody, okay? So that's a good simplification. So if we go down to my simplified version, notice that I crossed out the slurs, all right? So you could do that too with a pencil. The other main thing I did is when you have Irish type embellishments, like this turn, so that's played like this. So unless you're a master and you know that as soon as you get to that, I know how to do turns really well, I can just jump right into it, then I would suggest not doing it. And again, I suggest not doing it even if you are quite advanced. I mean, I try to do this too, like what is this core melody going to sound like without that turn? So looking at down here, this is what we wind up with if I take out the turn. So now looking at the basic version I presented, that bar was... So they're a little different still, but anyway, I think you get the point. So basically remove as much stuff as you can, and this will help you to learn the tune, and it'll help you be more creative. It'll help you really more deeply understand the tune and hear the melody. So that's it for this lesson. I hope it's helpful, and I hope that as you go on your fiddle journey and on this note reading adventure, that you're finding ways to enjoy it. And remember that the point of reading music, I think for most people, really is to play more music. And so if you're getting really frustrated with this, don't worry. Just let it go for the day. Go back to playing something and just do it the next day. Just do a little bit every day, and it's going to slowly start to make sense. I am a super slow thinker. It takes me a while to get things, and so I that's what I teach too. Maybe you're the kind of person who quickly figures things out, and this will be boring for you, this approach. But overall, if you really just patiently just do a little bit every day, not a lot of expectations, then you'll eventually be able to do this. You'll eventually be able to read the tunes you love. Okay, that's it. Let me know if you still have questions, and if you have ideas on how to do this, how to read better, let me know. Let me know if you even want to do this. Okay, see you later. Go to FiddleHed.com for a progressive, step-by-step course outline, color-coded tabs, play-along tracks, sheet music, and much more. Thanks for watching the video. Excellent! And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.